everyone, and welcome to another episode of the NBCPA's podcast celebrating Black History Month. I am your host, Asia, and today I am joined by our extra special guest, Clive Newsome. Welcome, Clive.
Thank you, Asia. I'm glad to be here.
It is absolutely brilliant to have you here today. Now, for those that don't know Clive, Clive is the head of Business Centre in CPS London and has been in this role since 2019. Clive has oversight for the business support for two of the biggest areas in the organisation. This includes management of the communications function, performance, finance, business change, and of course, inclusion and community engagement. Before joining the CPS, Clive has held many senior management positions within the Youth Justice Board, Ofsted, and the Greater London Authority. So Clive, clearly a very busy man. So thank you so much again for taking the time to join me today. I'm really happy to be talking with a fellow colleague who is thriving in the operational delivery profession.
Thank you.
So,
You're welcome. You're welcome.
so let's kick things off, starting with the reason why we're here today, Black History Month. Clive, can you please share with us what Black History Month means to you?
Well, it means a lot. For me, it's a period of reflection on the progress made as well as to celebrate achievements. I just feel that historians and commentators have undervalued the contributions of Black people over many centuries, and that's still going on. And that false narrative is still present in modern day perceptions and continues to have that sort of negative impact on generations of Black people in many walks of life. So I just feel that Black History Month gives a window to celebrate the positives that we have brought globally and to our local communities and to understand the context of kind of the achievements that we've made to society. So I welcome it. I love it.
Perfect. And absolutely, there is a reason why it's still here. We still need to present this in the modern day to erase that false narrative and erase those negative conceptions about Black history not being our history, because we can't talk about history without Black history and those contributions in the past. So, leading on to this year's theme of Black History Month, the theme is time for action, no, time for change, apologies, time for change, action, not words. What does this look like for you as a person of colour?
Well, I get a great deal of satisfaction about talking about achievements whenever I look back in time. So, whatever the subject, it could be about Black achievement, it could be about sports achievements, it could be about success in a career. In doing so, you quite often have to overcome barriers, don't you, that makes the success even more rewarding for the individual or anyone else. But whilst there is so much to be proud of in terms of how far Black people have come, and the successes in all aspects of life, I still feel a sense of frustration that even the acknowledgement of Black people's success, when you look at statistics across all sectors. So I'm thinking about things like education and exclusion from the education system. And also, in terms of education, when you look at kind of the inequality in terms of our access to the top universities. You can look at criminal justice system. Black people four times are more likely to be stopped and searched, and the disproportionality in the prison system as well. Mental health, unemployment rates. I think all of those things don't give an overall good picture of where we are or where we should be in society. So for me, there has been a lack of progress in addressing those systematic issues, even with the awakening of the inequalities in people's consciousness around the tragic killing of George Floyd. So I do think that whilst it's time for celebrating really great contributions and achievements, which we should always do across Black History Month, I'm just really happy that the mantra of time for change, action, not words, sits kind of atop it this year around. And it marks this year because I hope it pushes everyone, black or white, to come together to start to address those imbalances in our society. So
Yeah,
that's what it means to me. It's really about kind of addressing some of those systematic kind of failures that's still ongoing, we've been talking about for such a long time.
absolutely. And I think what you say there about everyone coming together is really key, because for too long the burden has been on Black people, experiencing racism, being the problem. I say this, the problem, and then also being expected to fix the problem. This is about us collectively, not just talking the good talk, but actually seeing that in change, like you say, in policy, in education. Um, and you touched there on barriers, and which leads really nicely into my next question, specifically about the operational delivery profession. And in the operational delivery profession, we are often described as the public face of public service. Yet we don't always have that diversity in that profession. Um, so I'd be really interested, Clive, in hearing about what do you think are the barriers for people of colour progressing within the operational delivery profession?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I've now been in the CPS for over 3 years, and I can categorically say it's not due to a lack of talent in the operational delivery from black staff. So I just really want to say that up front. But I do think at the same time it's really important to take your own self-development very seriously. And by this I mean every day at work is a learning experience, particularly around developing good skills and practices, from watching good role models, setting personal objectives that stretch you, understanding when you have to improve, but seeking feedback even if it's on things which you don't see it as a strength in yourself. So just really just looking for those things that you can get better every day at. In terms of the barriers, I think they're evident for all to see. I think, firstly, I think there's just a lack of black people that you see as you climb the seniority ladder. And this kind of how this impacts on black people in the operational delivery. It means that your own confidence and self-belief is impacted by that, and you lose kind of some of that strength that you need to kind of push yourself further. I also think that there's a lack of diversity still on recruitment panels. I often wonder myself today whether I would feel confident coming through successfully on more junior grade interview panels, not because I doubt my own ability and experience, but because panels rely heavily on judgment and perception, and we find favor with those we ordinarily relate to in our normal lives. And I just think that that's something that we could easily address going forward, and I think it would have a positive impact. I just think that making panels more representative, with black people involved in recruitment, chairing panels would be a real help. The other thing I think about is really about management. We just need good managers who understand at all levels, preferably with wide experience of other departments, kind of how to manage staff and how to get the best out of them. I'm not saying that we don't have some good managers now, but specifically talking about the CPS and how good managers, how important managers are to making that difference. So where there is an issue of failure, to work with their staff and others to address things. It's about being fair and about how you create opportunities for staff to extend themselves through giving deputizing opportunities, getting staff to take on activities that will bring greater exposure and challenge to their work. In London, we have a future managers program that's currently ongoing that is an opportunity for those aspiring managers to get a greater insight into the role of the manager. And I think this is excellent. But the truth of the matter is, only line managers have it within their gift to create an environment which is fair and affords those opportunities for their staff to really develop and feel included. And finally, I think the other thing I think is I think the anger and emotion and outpourings from George Floyd's killings, as I mentioned before, was in a perverse way a really good thing, because it was felt that right the way across all ethnic and racial groups spoke out about how they were feeling at that time. I just think that that getting not just black staff to become more involved in kind of changing things is the best way to get the results that we're all looking for, which is a more equal sort of workforce balanced across all of the grades, and to make sure that there is no feelings of disadvantage or no further barriers to people wanting to progress. So that's my view on it. I think it really is about kind of making sure that recruitment panels are representative, but also that managers play their role, not just black managers, but black managers across all grades in terms of creating that environment.
Definitely. And thank you for sharing that, Clive. Um, so we know that Black History Month gives us the global spotlight, shall I say, to recognise those contributions and the achievements within the African and Caribbean heritage. But it's also an opportunity for people to learn more about the effects of racism and how to challenge those negative stereotypes. So, can I ask, Clive, have you ever experienced racism, and was there any learning from your experience that you're willing to share with us today?
Yeah, I think it would be a surprise if I said I hadn't experienced racism. I've been in the CPS for over 3 years, and I've worked in several public sector departments. I've encountered racism in most. It manifests itself in many ways, and largely, when you experience it a lot of the time, it doesn't hit the threshold for kind of a successful formal action. So that's not always the route that I would personally take. And generally, what you find is only the victim of an act of racism fully understands the wound that it causes. So I tend to deal with the person by making them aware of what I stand for, and that I have a zero tolerance to any form of discrimination. And if they don't understand, I take my time to make them understand. As most people who carry out an act of racism don't see themselves in that light. So it's really important that you sort of take that time to kind of make sure that they understand how they've caused an offence, or they're putting a barrier in your way, rather than taking kind of that formal action. If needs be, you can do that as well. But my way is really to talk to people and get them to understand. You asked me whether there's any learning from the experience, and I say yes, but it's really personal learning, and that my emotions hasn't changed over the years. It still makes me quite angry, which is not the best way to be when addressing people who have offended you. So that's kind of the learning that I've picked out for it. But what have learned is how to channel that inner Hulk and to be more measured in responding, so that the right outcome is achieved, for kind of the person or the people who have caused that offence.
Thank you, Clive, and thank you for opening up. I think there's definitely a theme with this episode about that ongoing conversation, that it's not just a month, it's about having those conversations as the individual, as the line manager, whatever profession that you're in. So thank you, some really interesting things there. Now, this leads me on to my last question, which is about any advice that you'd give to your younger self? And this is quite a broad question. So whether it's those experiences of racism or within your career, what's your one little bit of Clive that you'd like to leave us with?
Okay. I suppose how I would answer this is just to say that I came from a council estate in Vauxhall, which is right next to Brixton in the south of London in the 80s. So I've marched. I've seen firsthand a riot. So thank God there weren't any sort of selfies around in those days, or mobile phones. As you would have seen pictures of me back then, when I had hair with an unkempt afro, holding up a placard in the streets. That's kind of where I came from back then. The point is for me that I don't think my younger self would take any lessons from me even now, to be quite honest, because I know what I was like then. So I often talk to my younger self now when I speak to my nephews about race and being young and black today, and I learn a lot from their experience. And actually, Asia, not a lot's really changed, and that's why this year's Time for Change, Action Not Words is really important to me. So in some ways, I would like to reverse the question. My younger self would say to me right now, rather than kind of what I would say to my younger self. So I think my younger self would say to me right now is, don't get worn down by the process of change and to stay positive and persevere. But, generally, what I always say to myself now is continue to just be true to myself on this important subject of racism and things like Black History Month and remaining positive.
Thank you. And I love that spin. It is all about being your authentic self, your younger self, your older self. Um, and like you say,
Keep,
hopefully, with the theme, it's an ongoing conversation. It's Black History Month, even though it's 1 month in a year, the topic, the themes, the challenges, they're not going anywhere.
yeah,
Um,
keeping the spirit alive.
yeah, definitely. And I almost want to hear more about your days back in Vauxhall, but we don't have time for that. Perhaps a different episode. But thank you so much, Clive. That brings us to the end. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. And thank you for being such a supportive member of the NBCPA network. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know you can't clap with me now, but I'm doing a little clap here. Clive Newsome, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. My pleasure.